Welcome everyone. My name is Ron Bellman. I'm a Club Z alumni, and it is my honor to be your co-host today for Club Z's first ever virtual summit dedicated to breaking free, celebrating Zionism, justice, and action.
That's right. Hello, I'm Ariella Moel, a Club Z teen. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Combat Anti-Semitism movement, our proud partner without whom today's summit would not be possible. Now, today we're live from a studio in Los Angeles, where we will be having speakers from all over the world joining us.
Also joining are our Club Z teens from all over the United States.
Hey guys!
As you know, we are a national movement with chapters in the Bay Area, Los Angeles, Charlotte, and New York. Ariella, what is Club Z all about?
Club Z is a place where Jewish teens understand that each and every one of us has a role in Jewish history. We have serious educational meetings that can rival an AP history class, and we also know how to have fun together by going on hikes, scavenger hunts, or making shakshuka. At the end of the day, we're a community, a network, a family.
The Z in Club Z unapologetically stands for Zionism. Club Z is becoming more and more necessary with Jewish students being under attack, having their identities redefined in the media and in the schools. Jewish teens are told that they need to check their Zionism out the door if they want to be cool, and that Zionism is racism.
This is so true, and today you'll have the opportunity to hear and engage with activists that are combating anti-Semitism by using different tools, from legal to social media to new ways of standing up for justice.
That's right. Now, we are honored to be hosting our keynote speaker, a great ally for the fight against anti-Semitism, founder and executive director of the Lawfare Project, Brooke Goldstein.
What an honor! We'll also get to meet some of the Club Z teens. And I hear that at the end of the program, a special announcement will be made.
I'm looking forward to hearing what our teens who are on the front lines have to share with us. On that note, Ariella, what does our theme, Breaking Free, mean to you?
I'll tell you this, Ron. If there's one thing I learned at Club Z, it's that there's no point in having all the knowledge in the world if you're not going to act on it. We're all about action, breaking free from indifference and fear.
Yes, we are. Speaking of action, this year has been full of it. I'm still in awe that we were able to deplatform a convicted terrorist and unabashed Jew hater from speaking over Zoom. It feels so good to know that I was a part in Jewish history.
Oh no, you know who you're beginning to sound like?
Me?
You're beginning to sound like the very woman who founded Club Z. Don't worry, it's a good thing.
Well, thank you. She's here in studio and will be joining us next.
That's right. But before we bring out the woman behind the movement that has been disrupting the Jewish teen space and making headlines, I'd like to remind you that we're live on Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook. So feel free to chat your questions or comments, and our team is here to answer them. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
I'm so excited to be here and so grateful to Combat Anti-Semitism movement and the entire Club Z team for putting together this event. Today is truly a celebration. I can't believe I'm saying this, but thanks to COVID, today's program is available to everyone, everywhere. Originally, I set out with a small and simple idea: to empower teens, to give them confidence and knowledge so they can be proud Jews and proud activists making a difference. My vision is now a reality, and we have 5 chapters all over the country. We can hardly keep up as more and more people write to us asking that we start a Club Z chapter in their city. Since Club Z started, we have educated and empowered the lives of over 100 teens. And our alumni, they're all across the nation, taking on BDS, writing for student government positions, and successfully lobbying the IRA definition of anti-Semitism to be adopted at major universities. Now, I'm thrilled to invite my friend and colleague, Brooke Goldstein, the founder and executive director of Lawfare Project. Brooke has been at the forefront of the legal battle to give Jews the same protections against persecution that any other minority faces. The Lawfare Project provides pro bono legal services to protect the civil and human rights of the Jewish people worldwide. Most recently, Brooke has been a founder of a grassroots movement and Jew hatred that is empowering the Jewish communities to come together and rally against anti-Semitism. It's my pleasure and my honor to welcome Brooke tonight.
Thank you, Masha. It is an honor to have been asked to address Club Z and your audience today. I am so proud of the work that we've done together. And I think that Club Z is one of the most important organizations that exists today when it comes to training Jewish youth in a Zionist education that's rooted in Jewish pride and in a civil rights narrative. I think that right now, anyone who is watching the news will agree that we have an opportunity because we are witnessing the rise of minority rights movements in the West that are creating seismic shifts and changes in the way that the public deals with minority communities, whether it's Black Lives Matter or the new women's movement or the gay rights movement. It is undeniable that these movements, using 21st century social mobilization and organization techniques rooted in civil rights advocacy, are creating massive change, whether you agree with them or not. And yet, Jews and the Jewish community still have not mobilized themselves to achieve this type of effective change. And the question is why? I believe it's because we have rooted our advocacy not around a civil rights narrative, but we've primarily centered it around what we call a pro-Israel narrative. Now, pro-Israel narratives are extremely important. Fostering a dialogue and winning the so-called debate about the conflict that's happening in the Middle East that is an existential threat to the Jewish state is absolutely essential. But it has handicapped us here in the United States if the goal is to ensure that we live here free from discrimination in this country and in the diaspora. So the question is why? Why has the pro-Israel narrative until now not resonated as a civil rights narrative on campus to the extent that it has shifted the anti-Jewish discrimination to become less? Why are we seeing it become more? I think there are 3 or 4 answers to this question, depends on how you group it. The first is that a pro-Israel narrative, by definition, creates a binary, a pro and an anti. And if we described ourselves as pro-Israel, then what we are admitting is that there is another camp, which is apparently legitimate, which is anti-Israel, and that any objective person coming into the space has to consider both sides and to make a conclusion. I think this is a strategic mistake. The second way that this has handicapped us is because it has created a narrative that's centered on rebuking and defending against false accusations. It has created a defensive posture for us, which is a weak posture, and it necessitates us repeating the allegations of our enemy, training our Jewish youth to defend against accusations of apartheid, repeating that terminology, that false terminology, defend against accusations of illegal occupation, defending against something called BDS, repeating an acronym that I guarantee if you go to any town USA and you poll 100 people and you ask them, what is BDS? Are you for it or against it? They wouldn't know what you're talking about. They would have to look up what the acronym means, and then they would go and have to research, what they're for and what they're against and what the BDS claims are and so forth. Instead, if we framed our opposition against this bigotry as that which is against discrimination based on race, ethnicity, national origin, and religion, I guarantee you that people would be for it. If you ask, are you for or against BDS? They would have to do the research that I just mentioned. But if you polled 100 people and said, are you for businesses not doing, or a restaurant or a store not doing business with somebody because of the color of their skin, or because of where they were born, or because of their religion? Most people would say, absolutely, I'm against that. And we have failed to phrase the anti-BDS narrative as a civil rights issue. We have failed to phrase the BDS movement as one that aims to violate the basic civil rights of Jews due to our protected ethnic, cultural, religious, and national origin categories under law. I'll give you an example. When the Lawfare Project sued the National Lawyers Guild, the oldest lawyers guild in America, for enforcing a so-called BDS resolution, in the end, we forced the guild to adopt a resolution declaring that it prohibits its members from discriminating based on national origin and other protected categories. The third reason that the narrative, the so-called pro-Israel narrative, has handicapped us is because it has legitimated the excuse, I'm not anti-Jewish, I'm just anti-Zionist, and I'm engaging in a political debate. So what do I mean by this? When the Lawfare Project sued San Francisco State University, SFSU did not dispute the fact that it allowed Jewish students to be left out of the Know Your Right fair, to not have been included in a Know Your Rights fair. It did not dispute the fact that a Jewish event was shut down. It said, oh yeah, well, we admit these facts, but the Jewish students weren't discriminated against because their religion. We didn't discriminate against them because they're Jewish. We discriminated against them because they are Zionists. And Zionism is a political point of view. It's not a protected category, and therefore we're not in violation of California's anti-discrimination law. If we respond to anti-Jewish discrimination by arguing Middle Eastern politics, we legitimate that response. If we respond to a Jewish student being spat on and called a dirty Zionist pig, which is what's happened to our client at Columbia University, if we respond to Jewish students being excluded from events by debating Middle Eastern politics, we are giving credence to that narrative. Just like it is racist to have a problem with the Chinese government's handling of COVID and then turn around to a Chinese American student and discriminate against them, blame them for the crimes of a foreign country. Just like it's racist if you have a problem with Iranian nuclear disarmament or the lack of Iranian nuclear disarmament, you don't turn around to the local Muslim American student and discriminate against them. That's bigotry. But we have allowed people to discriminate against Jewish students, offering and imposing on them a political litmus test because they're Jewish, because we have then trained them to respond to this discrimination by debating a foreign conflict. And finally, what we have lacked to date, up until Club Z, frankly, is to provide a method for our youth to engage in the way that civil rights activists engage in the 21st century by doing things like so-called virtue signaling online. Posting a pro-Israel post, 10 reasons why Israel is not an occupying state, is simply not the same thing as going to a Breonna Taylor rally and posting a selfie with your fist in the air. We have failed to give them this type of advocacy that resonates in the 21st century. And that has led to a huge void, which has allowed our Jewish youth to be swept up in these other social movements like Black Lives Matter, like the New Women's Movement, where they are marching behind people like Linda Sarsour and Tamika Mallory, and they're being told by so-called progressive Jewish outfits that in order to stay relevant, they have to ignore the Jew hatred in these movements and march behind them. Otherwise, we're going to cede the space. This doesn't inspire pride and respect. It breeds contempt. And that is why Club Z is so important, because it recenters what it means to be a Jewish advocate on advocating for yourself as a proud Jew, as a proud minority community in this country, deserving of equal protection under the law. It advocates against the systemic Jew hatred in Western and Eastern culture. It advocates for Jewish liberation in the advocacy space. It advocates for redemption of the academic space. It advocates against the colonization of the term Zionism. It advocates against the appropriation of Jewish pain. Advocates against denying the uniqueness of our communal history and the uniqueness of Jewish pain and inherited trauma. It creates safe spaces for Jewish students to discuss the pain and the trauma they feel, with the goal of empowering them using civil rights terminology. And it heals this pain by really training our Jewish students in emancipatory civil rights training that's aimed, again, at empowering them to be advocates, not to send them into the campus with a shield instead of a sword. And so that is why I'm so proud to have partnered with Club Z, both in the End Jew Hatred movement and many other instances. Number one, because they are a leader when it comes to advocating against lumping anti-Semitism together with so-called anti-racism training, which again denies the uniqueness of our historical pain and the uniqueness of what is anti-Semitism in terms of a form of bigotry. They have gone on the offense with their Bill of Rights. They are reshaping what Jewish advocacy is on campuses by going on the offense and proposing using civil rights terminology that resonates through their Bill of Rights, which I encourage everyone to read online and to ensure that every single school that they are involved with adopts this Bill of Rights. Club Z ensures that not only are Jews connected to their heritage and the Jewish state, but also that Jewish youth are prepared to pick up the mantle and effectively advocate for themselves as a minority community, whether it's on campus or later in the workplace or even in social media. I had the opportunity to meet Jennifer Carlin, who you're going to see later on a teen panel, because she literally was the star of the show when Lawfare and End Jew Hatred and Club Z and all of our partners came together to stage a protest, a groundbreaking protest against Jew hatred at USC, at the University of Southern California. Jennifer Carlin took the stage, and because of the training that she received at Club Z, she was one of the most powerful speakers and has since then gone on to now shape her social media presence and continue to speak out for the Jewish people and against Jew hatred. Because when you watch and when you listen to Club Z teens, you can't help but feel the utmost respect, the pride, the courage, and the dignity that they display leads me to have the utmost respect for the work that Masha and Naya and their team do and all the efforts that Club Z is making for our community. I'll leave you with this. Club Z is not a letter writing organization. It is an action organization. And I urge you to support it and to send your teens to Club Z. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brooke Goldstein, for your inspiring remarks, and more importantly, for highlighting the educational philosophy at Club Z. I realized that it was at Club Z that I first learned to decouple racism and anti-Semitism, that our fight is a fight for the liberation of our people, and that Jew hatred has a unique history. Can you believe the amazing work Club Z is doing with the End Jew Hatred movement?
I know. As we can see, We're not just an educational resource. We want to grow a network of activists.
Well, the first step is becoming part of Club Z. I joined Club Z because I wanted to hear another perspective that I wasn't getting. Let's hear what our friends have to say.
I joined Club Z so I can be better prepared for college and the future, and so I can stay connected to my Jewish friends.
I joined Club Z to learn more about my past, to make friends, and to hang out.
I love seeing everyone there because it's like a giant family in a really welcoming environment.
I wanted to learn more about why Israel exists and why it should continue to exist and how I can best defend it on and off college campuses in the future.
I joined Club Z to learn more about Israel and how to defend my homeland.
I joined Club Z because my sister joined first and I saw how much she was learning about Israel and I wanted to become a part of that.
I joined Club Z to learn how to stand up for myself and my beliefs.
Club Z is a space for me to share my experiences with anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism on my high school campus and on social media. It's a support group where I can share what I've seen and learn how to combat it.
Well, originally I joined Club Z because my mom told me to. It was the start of it in Charlotte. My mom was like, "You're doing this new thing, I'll drop you off there." You know, I went to the things, thought they were pretty interesting, guest speakers were awesome. And then I finally went to the conference and it was just amazing. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had, and after that I was definitely just hooked on Club Z.
I joined Club Z because I lived most of my life in Israel, and when I moved to the United States, I wanted to learn more about the Israel-Palestinian conflict from the outside in.
Before I joined Club Z, I was completely clueless. I had no idea what the word Zionism meant, so I really joined Club Z to kind of educate myself on the whole conflict and Israel's history and anti-Semitism. And I stay because not only is it a great community, but we learn a lot.
I'm part of Club Z because I went to a Jewish day school when I was younger, but I still feel that there's so much more I need to know about my people and my history, and Club Z is the place where I learn this.
Wow. I love you guys. We all agree that we need to combat anti-Semitism, but there are different ways of doing this. Our guests today are individuals who are taking action. To lead the discussion, please welcome our Director of Education, Dr. Naya Lecht.
Thank you, Ron. I am so thrilled to be here. Now, today we're going to be talking about activism, and we have with us leaders in the activism space. Please welcome Adela Kohab, who was the first to use the amended Title VI Civil Rights Act at NYU, Julia Jesse, co-founder of Jewish on Campus, an Instagram account founded just 7 months ago with over 20,000 followers, and Joshua Washington, executive director of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, who works tirelessly to bring the African American and Jewish communities together. Thank you so much, guys, for being with us today. So activism is a broad category, and there are effective and ineffective ways to act. We know that today one of the major epicenters of anti-Semitism is found on college campuses. Now, while there are traditional methods, such as appealing to college administrators, writing letters and petitions, we believe that we need to start thinking outside of the box. So I'll give you an example. Just this October, San Francisco State University invited convicted terrorist Leila Khalib to appear over Zoom to hundreds of students to basically continue bashing Israel and the Jewish people. So we could have appealed to college administrators, written letters, but instead we decided to go after a private company, Zoom. And here's the important part. The community at large, the Jewish institutions, were not in favor of this action. But we believed that this was a correct strategy. So together, with End Jew Hatred, we achieved great success. So today we're going to be discussing just that, effective, creative, forward-looking methods of advocacy and activism. Let's begin with you, Adela. The Trump order that gave Jewish students protection under the Title VI finally allowed you to file a lawsuit against NYU. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about what led you to make that decision, a little bit about Title VI and your experience, your story at NYU?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for letting me share my story. I was a student at NYU, like anyone else. I was not extremely involved in Israel activism, and in my freshman year, I found a group called Realize Israel. It was pretty quiet for most of my college career. My junior year, suddenly everything turned to Israel on campus and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. At that point, I was on student government. I was president of Realize Israel, and we had one hit after the other to the pro-Israel community. From comparing Zionists to Nazis and to racists and fascists, to boycotts on student government, to a boycott pledge by 53 groups that built a coalition against us, to eventually flag burnings and a physical assault of a Jewish student. Throughout this process, I was meeting with administrators, telling them that they had to do something, that something big was coming. And all of them told me I was overreacting. When the flag was burned and the Jewish student was assaulted, NYPD stepped in because US law was broken, specifically New York City law. And for some reason, the school said they would take action, but quietly. I felt they were finally listening to me. They said, you're right, we're going to do something about this, but let us do it on our own terms. Don't post on social media, don't host events for the rest of the semester, and maybe, don't even post on your own personal social media. Let things calm down, we're on your side, but let us do it the way we have to. And I went back to the Jewish community who was scared and angry and told them I was trusting the school to act. Less than a year later, the school gave NYU Students for Justice in Palestine, who had spent 2 years harassing my community, the President's Service Award. I would have even understood if the school did nothing. And I understand even if the school didn't want to actively make, a scandal about the flag burning and, the Jewish student assaulted. But to proactively give an award, that was a stab in the back to my community. And it proved I was very naive. And I walked out of the vice president's office after he refused to meet with me multiple times. And I decided to get in touch with lawyers. At the time, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act was only protecting discrimination against race and nationality and ethnicity, not religion. So I had to make the case that the way that they treated my group was attacking our shared ancestry. We had a party in Yom HaAtzmaut. We were all there because we were Jewish. I'm not personally Israeli. When they burned the Israeli flag, it was a symbol of my people. When they assaulted the Jewish student, she was singing Hatikva, which is the anthem of the hope of 2,000 years to be a people in our homeland. I had to jump through so many hoops, but finally I decided I would file a case against NYU. They told me it would be difficult, and they told me it likely wouldn't win, but it would be the first case that they thought was strong enough to actually pass the barrier of Title VI and hopefully make history in the United States. I, thank God, graduated 2 weeks after filing my case and spent the summer trying to get as much publicity as I could until I got a call from the White House saying the president saw the problem of anti-Semitism on college campuses, inviting me to come speak about Title VI and about my experiences at NYU. 3 days later, the executive order was passed, and about a year later, my case was finally settled. NYU, as per the settlement, the first settlement openly addressing anti-Semitism as part of Title VI, is going to have to change their policies to make sure that anti-Semitism is as protected as every other form of discrimination, and Jewish students have the same rights as other minorities on campus.
Wow, that is an amazing story, really, truly. It's also heartbreaking. Adela, I have a follow-up for you. I hear that Jewish institutions on campus urged you not to take action, and that campus administrators, as you just said, sent you through bureaucratic loopholes. And yet you finally decided that enough was enough and you took it to the next level. You decided to take it to legal level. For our teen viewers who are watching, and they'll be on college campus no doubt very soon, what do you advise them to do? Do you advise them to take a stronger actions earlier, or allow the universities and the Jewish institutions to run their course? Do you suggest that they take stronger actions sooner, or do you trust the system?
For me, I never considered myself an activist. I was more about advocacy. I was more about going to administrators, sitting in offices, and reaching compromise. But that let everyone step all over me. I spent 2 years meeting with 8 administrators across 5 departments. I jumped through every single hoop that they put in front of me. I kept a paper trail. When I finally had enough and decided to file my case, because I had everything so well documented and I used every single channel that would have been available to me, that's what made my case so strong. So my advice for high school students that are soon entering the college campus is to, number 1, hold your ground from the beginning. Number 2, know that your voice is worthy and know that you have the same rights as others. And number 3, don't be afraid to make the scandal. Don't be afraid to make the headlines. I was petrified. I love my university, and I never thought that I would be the girl where the headline would read, Jewish student sues NYU for anti-Semitism. But because of my standing up and because of my case, I was able to change something for college students across the country. So even though there was a lot of pushback, even though I heard from my own mentors that this case would do more harm than good, I'm very proud of what I did. That said, you shouldn't take legal action right away. You should go through every single channel available. And if the channels aren't working, that's when you have to step out of the box. And don't be afraid to step out of that box, because your effect can have a ripple effect across others, and finally start changing the tide against anti-Semitism.
So we're going to return to you in a bit. I want to now turn to Julia. Julia, you are currently a sophomore at the University of Chicago, where you study political science. And just this summer, you and your peers decided to start an Instagram account called Jewish on Campus. Now, this account allows Jewish students from all over the US to share their testimonies about how they experience anti-Semitism on college campuses. Why did you begin this? What led you to start this account?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So a couple of things. So we started the account over the summer because we were realizing that there was a trend toward Jewish students feeling uncomfortable on college campuses. And Jewish students have historically been active participants in so many different spaces in the university world, myself included. We come from so many different backgrounds, where we're from, what we believe in, but we're tied often, no matter where we stand politically, we're tied to Zionism. That's a really important part of our identity, because it is a sense of peoplehood, and it's what makes so many 6 million Jews survive. It's what the country that we reside in. I'm personally American, but I have family from Israel, and I know that Zionism is the reason why my family has been able to survive. So that's often been throughout our history a uniting factor, from Jews from all different places. And you're seeing students who, when they are vocal about their Zionism, no matter where they come from, are being targeted and left out of classroom conversations. This comes from students and from peers. And we had all of these stories that were circulating around the internet, and we realized that there was a need to create a place where students can feel like their voices are heard, where that uniting factor for all of us is our Zionism, and our pride in Judaism. And so we got together, a few students and I, and began making an Instagram page to talk about our experiences and gain a tremendous amount of traction from Jews from all different walks of life. And that was really inspiring for me to see. We had Jews from everywhere, from all different countries, from all different universities, from all different backgrounds, reaching out to us and saying, you know, this account is showing me that my story is not alone, that there are things happening all over the world, just like was happening to me. And so we realized that there was a need for it to be bigger than just Instagram, bigger than just social media, and to become a nonprofit organization working to really mobilize students. And our common thread is that we come from such different places, but what unites us is our love and our pride for our heritage and our ethnicity. And that's what really pushes us, you know, whether you are, like, no matter where you come from, no matter what you do, Judaism is an inspiring part of our lives, and we are looking to kind of promote that with pride. So we're creating a nonprofit organization now kind of centered around that.
So one more question for you. One of the many strengths of this Instagram account is that it serves really as this digital archive. And yet many of the testimonies are anonymous. Why is that? And has that been an issue in terms of putting pressure on schools?
Things are mostly anonymous because students are afraid to face backlash, and that's understandable because there is a tremendous amount of backlash that students do face. And I think that one thing that we're seeing is, as we're sharing these stories and as people are sharing them to their Instagrams, are starting to be more vocal about Zionism, and people are seeing, oh wow, these are people from such diverse backgrounds, such diverse political beliefs, such diverse stories, who are all coming together with this common belief. It's inspiring them to also share, because there's no one face to Zionism. There's no one face to Judaism. We all are different. We all have different histories, but we're kind of tied together by this common thread. And seeing people being vocal and active and proud is largely inspiring more people to do so. But I think that these stories are important. I think that acknowledging why students do choose to be anonymous is also really important, because it comes from a place of understanding that there have been students who have faced backlash and have been targeted because of their Judaism. And us deciding to give them that privacy allows more students to feel comfortable coming forward with their stories.
Wonderful. I think it says a lot. It speaks great volumes that in such a short amount of time, you've gained so many followers, and really this Instagram account has become a space to address something that is not being addressed by the adults in the room, which are the college administrators. So I think it speaks great volumes for your project. So I thank you for that. We're going to go on to Joshua. So you come from a very different background. You're not Jewish, and yet you are a staunch Zionist. So let me address the lay of the land in terms of Jewish activism. And it's really divided into two major groups. The first is appeal to the progressive elements within a society and get the seat at the intersectional table by proving just how diverse and progressive and amazing Israel is. And then there's this other school of thought, another perspective that aims to say, look, we're indigenous. We don't have to prove anything, X, Y, or Z, in order to be accepted. So what are your thoughts in terms of where American Jews are getting it right and where they're getting it wrong from your position standing from the outside?
Well, thank you, Naya, for having me, first of all. Secondly, yes. So as a non-Jew, I think if you said, on the outside looking in, one of the things that I see, I think, as something that is more of a drawback than a benefit is in some of the ways that Zionists advocate for Israel. And by that, I mean, we tend to go out and we talk about all the amazing things that Israel has done, all their humanitarian efforts, their NGOs, the fact that they have hospitals on the border of their enemies and they treat their enemy civilians, even in wars that they're not involved in, and on all these different things, which is incredible and amazing. But to the person who thinks that Israel stole land, they go, well, who cares? Who cares? Because they're doing all of this on stolen land, and so therefore they're illegitimate. And I think that as an Israel advocate, we have to stand firmly on the truth that first and foremost says that Jews are indigenous to the land, that Jews are indigenous to Judea, to the Levant, that they belong there historically. We can look at history. We can look at biology. We can go back and look at the ancient texts. I mean, Jews belong there, period. And then those other things are really just the cherry on top. But that truth has to be first stated and stood on firmly. And I think that going from there, I think it will be has been a more effective way to advocate for Israel.
That comment really resonates with our philosophy at Club Z. See, I too was a student once in Jewish day schools, and one of the tragedies really is we're sending off these young adults to college campuses saying Israel has cherry tomatoes, Israel has an amazing irrigation system, Israel is at the forefront of technology and medical advance. And they're ready to say it. And then they come to campus and somebody says, who cares? Because all these wonderful things are on quote unquote stolen land. And that is the biggest, I think, pitfall in terms of advocacy and activism training. We are not telling the students the most important foundational element, and that is that we are indigenous. We have an ancestral claim to this land. So you are speaking very wisely on this, and I'm really glad that we get to hear your perspective on this. But I have another question for you. You have been quite vocal in your criticism of BLM, and in particular, how BLM has a very strong anti-Semitism component. Would you say that your institutions, likewise, do not approve of your position and activism? And if so, how do you advise young people to take courage and stand up against the status quo? I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. Are we doing the right thing by doing that? What is your perspective?
So yes, you're correct. Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, where I'm the executive director, we have taken a very controversial stance. We oppose many of BLM's platforms, especially their anti-Israel agenda, their anti-Israel platform. And it has made a lot of enemies for us. But for us, again, going back to the truth, we have to stand on the truth. First of all, it's not something that we are making up. We're using, when we talk about this stuff, we're using words that they've said, speeches that they've had, leaders of different chapters who've organized entire events dedicated to defaming Israel, calling Israel the puppet master of nations and all these different things. So, we have to take a firm stance against it, especially when it's coming from a movement that called itself a Black movement. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is when it comes to backlash, I mean, yeah, we have to be, we have to accept the reality that, we won't always get a huge number of people on our side when we're standing up for the truth, at least not at first. And I think that it's important to remember that it's not about us, it's not about our gratification or fame. It really is about letting the truth come out. Because more so, to me, along with defending Israel and the Jewish people, I don't like seeing my community being lied to, and I don't like seeing my community being used for Jew hatred. And so we do what we do, both because we stand with Israel and the Jewish people, but also because we want to see our communities thrive. We want to see the African American community rise above this and actually come together with the Jewish community like we've seen in times past, whether it's way back with Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald, Martin Luther King, with Rabbi Joshua Heschel, or even what we see some of now with how Israel makes inroads even in the Black community. So we want to teach those things, and we know that at the outset we are going to be demonized, we will be attacked and all those things, but we do it because we know that the truth will eventually get through and cut through the lies.
Very true. So I want to take a few steps back and invite you all back to the discussion and really push back on this word activism and the backlash that people receive from it. And I'll begin with sharing something about myself. When I was in graduate school, I wrote a letter, open letter that I'm a Zionist. And I remember my professor took me aside to office hours, and he warned me. He said, "You'll never be taken seriously in academia if you're going to be an activist. Drop this activism right away." And it was a signal, and I had to make a choice. Now, Adela, you said you never thought of yourself as an activist. You thought of yourself as an advocate. Now, I know also that you're going to be going to law school. You're applying to law school. And one of the things that you have said is, well, I'll be known as that girl who sued a university. What are your thoughts about that tension between activism and advocacy?
It's a great question. And, when I was at NYU, I became the face of Zionism. I was, walking into my classes, I was studying Middle Eastern politics, and almost every class I walked into, I'd get stares and people would say, "That's the Zionist." Actually, when it got to my final exams for my Arabic class, no students would partner with me. And the one student who decided to partner with me started getting boycotted as well. By my senior year, I actually had left my positions on student government. I left my position in Realize Israel. And even though my major was still Middle Eastern studies, I started taking creative writing and dance because I was scared. I didn't want to be that girl in the class who was the Israel girl. And then right before graduation, when the award was given, I realized shying away is the exact opposite of what I should be doing. I am that Zionist girl. I am Jewish. I did come from a Jewish family my entire life, and Israel will always be an important part of my identity. And especially, wanting to pursue law, I'm not going to hide from what that is. So, looking at the college campus landscape, looking at how unpopular it is and how difficult it is to be that pro-Israel student in class, I look back and I wish someone would have told me to just have as much strength as I can. Now, what can be done when it comes to professors that tell you that you're not going to be taken seriously, or where you feel like you could write the paper that gives you the A, but if you write your true thoughts or if you write something on something that actually matters to you, you're going to get penalized. And I think that that's a larger problem in academia. And it's something that we, as a collective, if we don't start standing up and pushing against it, then, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So I hopefully will be going to law school. And I know I'm going to walk in. And I know that most people, who have followed the Title VI case, or at some point it'll come up, who I am, the Zionist, the girl that sued NYU. But I'm ready to fully embrace it. I'm not going to shy away. I'm not going to take classes that don't interest me because I'm scared of being myself and standing up for what I believe in.
All right, guys, so we're almost out of time, but I have to ask, what is your message today to American Jewish teens watching? What is your message? Let's start with you, Adela.
Thank you. So I went to a Jewish school my whole life. I thought there was everything there was to know. And when I showed up to my campus, I didn't realize how unprepared I really was for what being an activist meant. So my advice, number one, is to get informed. But more importantly, you can know everything, be the biggest advocate, be the biggest Zionist. If you don't share your love for Israel with others, they'll never know what Israel is. So my biggest advice is to step out of your comfort zone, to make friends, to talk to people, to speak up in your classes, to actually share your love and your knowledge with others, because that's the only way to really make a change.
Amazing. Anyone else on the panel would like to also add additional message right now to our American Jewish teens?
My message to Jewish American teens is a simple one. It's stand strong. I said before that there may be times when you'll feel like you're alone, but you never know who's watching. There are so many people who are watching you stand up and stand out and even withstand and endure ridicule. And you are inspiring them. I mean, just like you may have people who inspire you who don't know who you are inspiring other people. And so for you, I think that the biggest thing that you need to have, I think, in your heart when you step onto college campuses is that, again, you're not doing this for friends, but stand strong, because there are people who are watching you. You may never meet them for the rest of your life, but there are people who are watching you, who are being inspired by you and who are doing their own research and who are becoming Zionists themselves. So stay focused, push forward, and know that whether or not you actually see the results in front of you, you are making a huge change and you're making a big difference.
Unfortunately, we are out of time and we can continue this conversation for so long, but I just want to thank you all for your time and really for everything you do. Please follow these amazing stars, these activists on social media, as I am sure they will be continuing the fight against anti-Semitism, the fight for justice, for Zionism. You have no doubt inspired so many American Jewish teens and Jewish adults watching us today. So thank you so much.
Club Z taught me that Jews are from Judea. Just like the Japanese are from Japan, Italians are from Italy, and the Nigerians are from Nigeria, Jews are from Judea.
Masha taught me that being silent about injustice only brings more injustice.
Ariel taught me that everyone has an agenda and a bias. We need to use critical thinking skills to form our own opinions independent from these agendas and biases.
At Club Z, I have learned about the steps Israel took to secure its legitimacy in international law. Israel has earned every legal, historical, religious, and moral right to exist.
Ron has shown me how to stay level-headed and be respectful when debating with someone online. I have learned how to be an effective activist for Israel, Zionism, and the Jewish people.
Olga taught us that calling Israel an apartheid state is an insult to those who fought for racial equality and freedom in South Africa. It is a lie that denies the reality that Arabs and Jews are represented in all spheres of Israeli life, including government.
I learned from Naya that from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free is not about liberating the Palestinian people. It's actually a call for the end of Israel as a Jewish country.
I learned from Joshua that the way a society treats Jews indicates the way a society will treat anyone with opposing views. Jew hatred never stops with the Jews.
Club Z taught me to not be afraid to speak up and defend my heritage.
I learned from Club Z that Jerusalem is the undivided, eternal capital of the Jewish people. From the ancient kingdom of Israel to the democratic state today, Jerusalem has been at the center of the Jewish world and it shall remain as such forever.
Club Z has given me tools to better understand the Arab-Israeli conflict. I've learned how media bias in reporting the conflict contributes to anti-Semitism and Israel bashing.
Wow, guys, that was so powerful. It's a great opportunity to thank all the educators and speakers who are working with us and making sure that we have the knowledge needed to act. Now, for the highlight of today's program, my friends talk Zionism. Please welcome Philip Yurchenko, a co-founder and alumni of Club Z.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited to be the host for our team panel today. We are going to be talking about American Jewry, and we always hear about different studies coming out, but they never really focus specifically on American Jewish teens. This is the future generation, and it is important that we listen to their voices when it comes to anti-Semitism, Israel, and Zionism. We are fortunate to be joined here today with teens from all across the country, proud Club Z teens. We have Natalie, who is a junior calling in from Club Z headquarters in Silicon Valley. We have Daniel, a senior calling in from New York. We have Jennifer, a senior from Los Angeles, and Evan, a senior from Charlotte. Welcome all, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us on another Zoom call. Today, I want to learn a little bit about what it's like to be a Jewish student in high school today. Natalie, I know you've been with Club Z for 3 years, so could you tell us a little bit about why you joined Club Z and why you still continue to be so involved today?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Philip. I'm really excited to be here. So I joined Club Z definitely because of my family. My parents are from the former Soviet Union, so growing up, I was just constantly hearing stories of the anti-Semitism that they faced and that they had to live through. And because of their childhood, they knew that, the freedoms that they came to America for shouldn't be taken for granted. And they wanted me to be able to identify the anti-Semitism that they faced in their home country here. So that's why I joined Club Z originally. And I stay just honestly because it's really fun. I have a lot of great friends and I've made a lot of connections. And it's just a great place to talk about anything political, anything, really just nothing is off limits at Club Z. And that's why I love it so much.
So growing up, I would hear about the terrorist attacks that were happening in Israel. And when I was 5 years old, my aunt's house in northern Israel was destroyed by a Hezbollah rocket. And at the time, she was in Tiberias at a hotel, and she saw her own room be destroyed by the rocket on TV, which is scary. So from that day, I began to learn more and more about the conflict, and I just became more and more interested over the years. So when I was in my freshman year of high school, I realized I needed a space where I can talk to my friends and my peers about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And yeah, so when my mom found Club Z on Facebook, I jumped at the opportunity right away. I told all my friends to join too, and it just went from there.
Wow, well, thank you both for sharing those personal stories about your family that have shaped your Jewish identity and who you are today. I want to talk a little bit more about identity and specifically your Jewish identity. I remember from my time in Club Z, a foundational lesson that we learned was that Jews are indigenous to Israel and the importance of peoplehood to one's Jewish identity. Jennifer, I know you went to a Jewish day school for 8 years. Could you tell us a little bit about your Jewish education there? What did you learn about your Jewish identity when it comes to Jews being from Judea and Jewish peoplehood?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having all of us here today, Philip. But what I want to say is that, funny enough, in my 8 years of Jewish education, the entire time we learned of Israel in terms of our religious identity. Like, sure, we learned lots about Judaism in terms of, prayers and Israeli songs, but the idea of Israel itself was only portrayed in a lens that, we had a religious connection. And coming to Club Z really blew my mind when I learned the idea that Jews are indigenous, because it made me realize that being Jewish, it's not just about religion. And if we're an ethnic tribe, a people, a family, then being Jewish is not a choice. We don't get to choose how much we participate. It's in our blood and it's part of our peoplehood. And so we're naturally tied to it. And I think that just creates a stronger feeling that we're tied to not only our people, but we're just like that. With this one phrase, Jews are from Judea, we understand we're just tied to our land.
And Jennifer, I totally agree. When I was a kid too, I thought that Judaism was just a religious thing, but what I think is interesting that I found this out recently is for Russian Jews in the Soviet Union, being Jewish was not a matter of religion, it was more nationality or ethnicity even. It was pretty much written in every government document, from your birth certificate to school rosters to passports, all that stuff. And everyone knew, like your teachers, your boss, your neighbors, they all knew that you weren't like them, even if you didn't do anything remotely Jewish. And so in the eyes of society, you were not a Russian, you were a foreigner essentially. And my grandparents, my mother's parents, wanted to protect her from all this, so they hid her identity from her. She didn't even know that she was Jewish until she was 16, which is crazy to think about because that's not much younger than I am right now.
Yeah, and I think that the trends that Evan is kind of describing is why it's so easy for me to say that Jews are from Judea. You know, I may not be from Israel, my parents may not be from there, but that's where my people come from. So I just don't think that you can separate being a Jew and the land of Israel.
Okay, Natalie, I hear you all, but let me push back a little bit because you just said that you can't separate being a Jew from the land of Israel. We know plenty of people today who say, they are Jewish, proud Jews, but Zionism has nothing to do with their Jewish identity. If I understand what you're saying that Zionism is central to your Jewish identity. So how can you explain those two opposites?
I mean, if I may interject, I just want to say I think American Jews have done a terrible job defining Zionism. Because when you think of Zionism simply as an ism, like, say, nationalism, capitalism, or socialism, then you end up thinking about Zionism as if it's some political movement as well, which simply isn't true. I mean, the word Zion, Sion, means Jerusalem, and it comes from the Torah. And this word is as old as the Jewish people themselves. So when you think about it, I think American Jews get so stuck on this idea of an ism as if Zionism were simply some sort of political ideology, when in reality, it's fundamental to our belief as Jewish people, but more importantly, fundamental to our indigeneity and our peoplehood as we, trace ourselves back to the areas around Jerusalem. So American Jews, I think, just miss this idea, and they think so much about the ism, and they forget what is the root of the word Zion, Sion.
So how do we address that hot topic of anti-Zionism versus anti-Semitism? People say that those two are completely unrelated, that anti-Zionism is just criticism of Israeli government or Israel's policies.
Criticizing the Israeli government it's a different thing from anti-Zionism. They're two separate things. Anyone can criticize the Israeli government. The Israelis have had literally 4 elections in the past year. They criticize their own government all the time. Come on. Anti-Zionism, it's more than that. You're denying Jews the right to have sovereignty in their indigenous homeland. So, yeah, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic because if you're denying Jews and only Jews the right to sovereignty in their own homeland, then that makes you an anti-Semite.
I just want to add that recently Zionism has become masked as this progressive political position that in theory is supposed to help protect minority rights. Unfortunately, anti-Zionism is using the exact same accusations that have historically been exclusively applied to the Jews. And these are not some wishy-washy accusations. It's the real deal. These accusations lead to the persecution of the Jewish people time and time again. Take the Holocaust, for example. And now Israel has become the Jew among the nations in the world.
Yeah, so I think that the accusations, just to clarify, that Evan is talking about are things like blood libel, like demonization, claims that have historically been applied uniquely to the Jews and that are now being applied uniquely to the only Jewish state, the state of Israel. And I think it's not hard for anyone who's honest to say that, accusing the Prime Minister of Israel of being a devil bent on world domination is anti-Semitic, or depicting American officials as being controlled by some Israeli lobby. It's all anti-Semitic, and it all comes back to an anti-Semitic trope.
Okay, but we have proud Jews today who say they are anti-Zionist. So what are you trying to say here? Are you saying that they are anti-Semitic?
So I think more often than not, Jews are just misguided in the sense, especially American Jews. And if you see being Jewish as simply about social justice and eating bagels, then you're going to miss the fact that Israel is integral to who we are. And especially if, you get fed information from other places, especially places filled of hatred, and then you end up seeing Israel as not only just simply one of the many places to live, but also you see it in a negative light, with words like the occupation. But to be honest, I just think that they don't know the full history.
Right, so like I said earlier, if you're an anti-Zionist, that inherently makes you an anti-Semite since you're denying Jews the right to sovereignty in their indigenous land. So, yeah, if you're an anti-Zionist, whether you're a Jew or not, you're anti-Semitic whether or not you say explicitly that you hate Jews. And as for Jews being anti-Semites, yes, of course you can be anti-Semitic if you're a Jew. It's called playing a role in the oppression of your own people.
I know at Club Z, another foundational lesson is critical thinking skills, specifically to recognize, identify, and combat biases. So I want to learn a little bit more about that. Could you please tell me about how Club Z prepares you to recognize those biases?
Of course. So for me, Club Z has given me and my peers the space to think critically and to basically question everything. In fact, Olga Washington, our regional director here in Charlotte, consistently tells us pretty much every session to go home and fact check what she tells us so that we wouldn't take her word as absolute truth. She wants to make sure that we're up to date on all of our information. So yes, we do learn facts about Israel's history and anti-Semitism and things like that, but I think the most important thing that we learn are how to identify narratives and specifically the agendas behind them.
Now you're talking about agendas. People come to me all the time and they say, Philip, Club Z has an agenda. So I want to ask you all directly here, point blank question. Does Club Z have an agenda?
Of course it has an agenda. No, I mean, everybody and everything has an agenda. But the question is, what is the agenda based on? And is the agenda made clear? And in Club Z, the agenda is clearly expressed in everything we do. And Club Z's agenda, for example, is to create a new generation of teens who are strong and confident to stand up for Israel and to stand up for themselves. And the thing is, not all agendas are created equal. Some agendas are based on lies and hatred. And what Club Z teaches us so well is to be able to identify the biases in these different narratives that expose the lies and hatred. And I think that's one of the amazing things that you learn, because the question is, there's always bias and there's always a narrative, but can you identify it? And that comes with training.
I think every single person has an agenda. Every single organization has an agenda and a purpose. That's kind of the whole point. And I think that our generation is the first generation in history where in our schools we are taught not actual verified history, but we're taught narratives. And narratives have agendas. They have very clear goals to fulfill. And it's up to us to recognize the difference. And we're not taught to recognize the difference. So I think that that's one very important thing that Club Z contributes. Club Z teaches us how to recognize the difference between verified facts and narratives.
Oftentimes when you're on a college campus, you hear different types of language. So my question for you, Natalie, since you're in the midst of your Club Z education, if you hear someone using the words occupation, apartheid, what does that tell you about their agenda and their biases?
So yeah, this kind of twisting of words that's going on is just a really brilliant play by the anti-Zionists in America, who are often progressives, to kind of distort the meaning of the word, to make it really easy to side with the anti-Zionists. You know, you hear someone's under occupation, there's an immediate place you go to, and it's, I don't want to support, you know, colonialists who occupy indigenous peoples. So the way that these words are twisted makes it really hard for someone who doesn't understand the ins and outs of these narratives and these biases to identify them. And Club Z honestly has taught me to do that, to not take anything kind of at face value, to research what people are saying, to verify whether these claims are accurate. It's just something also that I don't think you really get on a high school campus. At least my high school hasn't really taught me how to think critically enough to be able to identify that kind of thing. But it's a really valuable skill to have, to be able to see when someone is using those kinds of that language against you.
Jennifer, can I throw this one to you?
Yes, of course, Philip. So when they say something along the lines of, you know, Jews being an occupying power, what they essentially mean is that, you know, Jews are not indigenous to Judea. What they're doing is, in essence, denying history. And all of the history of the Jewish people is that we're indigenous to Judea, and we've had history here for thousands of years. And by using language that paints the Jews as foreigners, as colonizers, it completely eradicates any claims that the Jews have to the land. And it makes it, like Natalie said, incredibly hard for you, for someone else to understand, you know, the truth of the matter, which is that we are an indigenous people. And so every word is chosen so carefully in order to deny the Jewish people their claims to the land and their history and the truth of the matter. And so it's very important to recognize this language, because even one word can hold such a powerful meaning. And with one word itself, you can already see how people are switch their views to be against something simply because of words that are oftentimes either they're half-truths or they're outright lies.
Let's take the conversation to anti-Semitism. I know that anti-Semitism is extremely high now in high schools, and especially on social media. Studies have found that 1/3 of Jewish teens don't feel comfortable identifying as a Zionist in public. I'm wondering, have any of you personally experienced anti-Semitism? And perhaps even more importantly, even if you haven't experienced anti-Semitism, how do you feel about fighting back and standing up?
Great question, Philip. So I personally have experienced minimal anti-Semitism, but to answer your question, let me ask another question back at you. When an African-American man is beaten on the streets and other African-American people protest it, do you ask them, hey, why are you protesting this? What makes you, want to stand up for this? Did they experience that particular incident of racism? No. But the thing is, their feeling of kinship and their bonds within their people are so strong that they naturally want to support and they want to be able to stand with their people when one of their members of their people is under attack. And I think that's something we need to bring to the Jewish community because, in essence, once you understand that we as Jews are one people, one tribe, one family, then naturally we too are going to feel a need and a desire to stand up when one of our peoples is under attack. And for me, Jews are family. So yes, if someone's going to punch my brother, I'm going to go after them. Same thing with anti-Semitism.
It's obvious you all know a lot. You guys think about these topics and discuss these topics a lot. But Club Z is not just a think tank. I want to talk a little bit about action. I know many of your friends, either at school or extracurriculars, they're scared. We just heard from the activist panel. Adela mentioned how she could have never imagined that she was going to be the headline on the front page Jewish activist. So what will you guys be taking from these activism stories?
Yeah, so Adela's story definitely had a huge impact on me. First of all, because it's just heartbreaking to know that she tried to work within the system. She tried to do right by her university, but the system essentially worked against her. The university awarded Students for Justice in Palestine. It's crazy to think that that's the environment that I will be entering really soon. But it's also just a really inspiring story to know that she actually did take action and helped Jews on every college campus. She's just really an example and a role model for me, and I hope that in the future I have her strength and her courage to call out Jew haters and to hold people accountable like Adela did.
Natalie, I'm totally with you. Adela's story was really inspiring for me as well, but I think we also have to consider that activism doesn't come in just one form. It doesn't necessarily have to be standing with an Israeli flag on a street corner. Personally, I like talking to people, and having one-on-one conversations allows me to directly educate my friends and even change some minds. A great example is a friend that I've been very close with for about 4 years sent something that was very anti-Zionist to my group chat, and I called him out, and we talked about it, and I showed him a bunch of resources on educating himself about Israel's history and anti-Semitism and such. And because we were two level-headed individuals, we can have a normal conversation, and he saw what he was doing was anti-Semitic. And as cheesy as it sounds, I wouldn't really be able to do any of that without a Club Z education.
Yeah, so I'm already out there. I make videos about anti-Semitism and Zionism, and I break down the myths, lies, and manipulations said about my people. And when you think about it, how ridiculous is it that we even have to talk about coming out as a Zionist? Like, what other group of people has to go through that? And I just want to say that everything we've been talking about this panel today really boils down to one thing: stolen identities. And the beauty of breaking free is that we're reclaiming the word Zionism. We're taking the word back as our own, because it is. And the word Zionism is such an amazing thing. And it's such an amazing thing to reclaim it and to be proud of such a beautiful and central thing to being a Jew.
Well, one thing that I was reminded of after listening to these inspiring stories, especially Adela's, I found was very inspiring, was that in the long run, we really don't have anyone watching our backs. The Jews have to stand. Yes, we have a few allies here and there, but the Jews are alone in this world. We always have had to fight for ourselves, and we're always going to have to fight for ourselves.
Wow, this is awesome. I know we're just meeting virtually, but I really am inspired to go ahead and break free. Now, we're almost out of time. I just want to open it up. Is there anything else anybody would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, if I can just say, none of us are kidding ourselves here. We know that just one random American Jew sitting alone in her room is not going to single-handedly protect, a country, the state of Israel. But it's a lot more than that. We are defending ourselves and our peoples and our identity. So I just want to say I'm really grateful to be on a panel where I can express that and where I can defend myself. So thank you.
Adding on to what Natalie said, when we stand up against anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism, we're not trying to defend some country, thousands of miles away. Like, they can do that on their own. But in essence, every attack on Israel, every attack on Zionism is a direct attack on our people as a Jewish people. So every time we stand up, we're not standing up for a country, we're standing up for ourselves and for our entire nation and each and every one of us. So I think that's such a beautiful thing. And I just want to thank everyone for making this possible today and for having us on this panel.
Well, thank you so much to all of you here. It has really been an honor to host this panel. I'm proud of all the work you are doing, and I can't wait to see what you guys will be doing on college campuses. I know that the future is in good hands. Now, to take it to the next level, I'm excited to introduce Daniel West Cohen, the Director of Partnerships at Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, to make an announcement.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you to Club Z. I'm thrilled to be here today. The Combat Anti-Semitism Movement is a grassroots coalition of 300 partner organizations and 300,000 activists, all dedicated to addressing anti-Semitism. We were founded on the premise that while there are a lot of great organizations out there doing important work to fight anti-Semitism, perhaps there wasn't enough collaboration or coordination between them. And so in 2019, in February, the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement was founded with the premise of sharing resources, sharing content, sharing information, and moral support amongst organizations that fight anti-Semitism. Currently, we know that there's organizations that address anti-Semitism online, or they address Holocaust remembrance or promote interfaith relations or anti-Semitism on campus. And we really strive to provide a network, to provide a forum, to provide resources and information for them to work together in this fight. We know that the fight against anti-Semitism is multifaceted, it's a mosaic, and we all need to work together to do a little something different to address the scourge that we're seeing across the globe, because everyone has different skills and experiences. A little bit about myself and why I believe the summit is important is when I was growing up as a teen, I experienced a lot of anti-Semitism. When I was in middle school, I was in rural Pennsylvania, and I experienced quite a bit myself. One of my first days of school, somebody threw a penny at me and said, "Pick it up, Jew." Another time, someone told me I was responsible for killing Jesus. And even another time, somebody told me when they grew up, they were going to join the KKK and kill me. So this is really an issue near and dear to my heart. And after I got out of middle school, I went to a private school for high school, and I experienced a completely different type of anti-Semitism. One of my friends told me that they didn't let Jews in their country club. And another one of my friends told me they didn't let Jews in their gated community. And even another one of my friends told me that they didn't let Jews in their parents' philanthropic organization. So we see that anti-Semitism is just this really complex problem. And then afterwards, I went to college and I experienced a completely different form of anti-Semitism, which is I encountered BDS on campus and people handing me flyers that saying, Jews are responsible for owning the world, or Jews were responsible for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I think I learned an important lesson there, which kind of resonates here today, which is that wherever you go, you can try to escape anti-Semitism, but it will manifest in a different form. And that's why it's so important to educate young people on the dangers of anti-Semitism and the importance of educating, young Jews and Jewish teens for fighting anti-Semitism. Because I wish that I had taken part in a summit like the one that we see today, because I think I would have a slightly different perspective than I did when I was experiencing those things going on. Jews today, young Jews today, they're really the bellwether. They're the canary in the coal mine in addressing anti-Semitism, and Jewish organizations and Jewish professionals and all people of conscience really need to do everything they can to support them, both morally and logistically, to fight this, because they're really the leaders of tomorrow. They're going to be in the future administrations. They're going to be the political leaders. They're going to be the business leaders. They're going to be leading NGOs. They're going to be artists and celebrities, and we need to support them however we can. So in that regard, I'm thrilled that today's summit showed that the voices of American Jewish teens not only matter, but that they can be cultivated by strong and well-trained organizations such as Club Z and CAM. These are the voices that are writing the next chapter, and there's nothing more important to us as Jewish professionals than to support these voices. So I'm very thrilled today to announce that CAM and Club Z are launching the Emerging Zionist Activist Award, and the winner will work closely with Club Z and CAMP to create a program to address either anti-Zionism or to promote Zionism, to address anti-Semitism, or to promote Israel advocacy. And once they complete this program, the winner will receive $5,000 to forward their campaign or their program. So thank you again so much for having me there. Please visit our website to learn more about this program, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I can't wait to see which team will win this amazing opportunity. We have a lot of work ahead of us. This is not the end. This is only the beginning. The phrase, "do not be afraid," appears in the Torah 365 times, once for every day of the year. Every day, we're reminded to overcome our fears and to keep moving forward. But the word courage or courageous appears only about 30 times, which makes me think that courage is more than not being afraid. Courage is a proactive step forward. Courage is for special times. Today, we heard from a few of the courageous people who decided to heed this call to act, to be brave. Their actions were not easy and are not without costs, from peer pressure to possible career repercussions to conflict with teachers or school administrators. All of these things play a role in making the decision to act out of courage. And we need a whole generation of brave Jews. We need thousands of Adelas and Julias, and let's not forget our non-Jewish friends like Joshua. However, we cannot put the entire burden of courage on our children. It's time for the Jewish community to wake up and smell the coffee. And with that, here are 2 things that every adult must do. If you have children, make sure they have the education that they need and deserve when it comes to their Jewish identity and Zionism. It doesn't matter if they're in private Jewish schools or they're part of popular teen groups. They need comprehensive, nuanced education that not only connects them to Israel, but builds their whole entire Jewish identity with the foundational knowledge we are the indigenous people of the Middle East. Giving our students talking points without them knowing history and understanding the context, without them seeing themselves that they are part of the proud people of a long tradition, we will only continue to struggle as a diaspora community, and our children will continue to struggle on their campuses. Now, let's not kid ourselves. Signing up your kid for a 3-part series of this or 1 weekend of that, that's a Band-Aid. It's not going to cut it if we're to raise a new generation of proud Jews. So yes, find Club Z near you, invite us to your community, or find another program that provides the academic depth, the nuance, and just as important, the fun. The second part that I need the community to rally around is Club Z's Jewish Student Bill of Rights. Let's get the Jewish schools, the synagogues, the JCCs to sign onto this document. Let's make it a given. The Jewish students have the exact same rights and protections as all other people. It's not complicated. And once we build enough of the momentum, we will then need to bring it to our public school boards and administrators. Imagine if your kid's school adopts this document. That's the kind of backing our kids need. They need to know that the adults will also have the courage to step up, to step out of our comfort zone and hold the teachers and administrators accountable when Jew hatred comes to their schools. It's not easy, it's not pleasant, and our children need us to do this. The road to justice is not meant to be easy, but to achieve justice, we must be courageous.
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. You got a rare, up-close look at the many challenges Jewish students are facing today in high school and on college campuses. We encourage you to break free,
liberate our identity,
stand up to injustice,
and take action. Ariella, I think that's a wrap. Yalla, let's go.